Well, welcome everyone to Homechurch. For a new beautiful day outside. The sun is shining brightly outside. Hopefully the sun will be shining brightly inside too. So, great to have you joining us, and if you're joining us online, great to have you coming along. And here in our family room.
Looks like Ingrid is with us this morning.
And
Dan and Susan. And we have somebody out in the Midwest tuning in today. It's like Kansas maybe? They really had a tough time this week.
Yeah,
Blizzard at the beginning and flooding at the end.
Yeah, if you're out there in the Midwest, well, we know you got slammed this week. We pray everything's working out for everybody. So, as always, though, let me invite everyone to pause for a sec. We'll start, as always, with a word of prayer. Father, thank you so much for your many wonderful blessings throughout the week and for your guidance and your direction. We pray and ask, Lord, that you'll continue to do that this morning. We need your Spirit as we open your word to enlighten us and give us discernment and understanding of your word so that we might be better prepared to meet the challenges day in and day out that come our way, but also to glorify you in all that we do and say and think. So we're asking these things in your Son's most precious name. Also, we want to remember those on our prayer list. We want to particularly lift up Kenny's family this morning as we laid him to rest this past week. It was a beautiful service, and a lot of people were there, and the Lord used us as we presented the service, and had an incredible impact on those that were there. We pray, Lord, that your word will not return void, and it will accomplish its appointed work. We know that Kenny would have been very, very satisfied and very proud of the service. But we're going to miss him, and our hearts are heavy because of that. And we know there are others out there today that have heavy hearts because of similar situations, or maybe you're feeling bad. I just ask, Lord, that you as the physician would guide and direct and heal where necessary. We want to thank you for hearing, for answering our requests. I do ask them in Jesus' wonderful name. Amen and amen. Okay, so that it was kind of a downer, a little bit of an emotional down for the week because we had the funeral service for Kenny on Tuesday. But like I said, everybody there really seemed to, they caught a glimpse of what he believed. Hopefully it'll make a difference in somebody's life that was there. So, but we're going to miss him. He was a wonderful gentleman. Died one day before his 82nd birthday. So he lived a good long life from our standard.
And thankfully his passing was quick rather than long drawn out.
Oh yeah, exactly. He only had a couple of weeks there where he was really feeling things. So, but anyway, he'll be missed, and we were just fortunate to have him as part of our congregation here for the last 4.5 years, almost 5 years, and then of course over at the church there for as long as we had been there.
He attended the Mennonite church there too.
Right.
We were there, so pretty much 20 years.
Yeah. So we've known him for a long time. We do need to remember his wife also. She's dealing with Alzheimer's, and she's in a nursing facility right now. So okay.
A little story?
We're going to go ahead and jump back into our story. It's not piercing the darkness. It's
this present darkness.
It's same author. About the spiritual warfare that goes on day to day.
Saturday morning the sun was out. Lawnmowers called to each other across fences and hedges. Kids were playing and hoses were spraying dirty cars. Marshall sat at the kitchen at the table filled with advertising copy and a list of new and old accounts. The Clarion still lacked a secretary.
Now, we want to just remind people that the vote at the church had already taken place, and the pastor was, by one vote, was voted to remain in place.
And this made the other people that were wanting him out very unhappy, and the other forces.
Right.
The front door opened and came Kate. I need a hand, she said. Yes, the inevitable unloading of groceries. Sandy Marshall hollered out the back door, let's get going. Over the years, the family had developed a pretty good system of grocery separating, handling, and stashing. Marshall said, Kate, passing vegetables from a sack to him at the refrigerator. Are you still working on that copy? It's Saturday. I'm almost finished. I hate to have stuff stacking up on me. How's Joe and the gang? Kate stopped a bunch of celery mid-transfer and said, you know what? Joe's gone. He sold the store and moved away, and I didn't hear about it. Wow, things happen fast around here. So where did he move? I don't know. Nobody would tell me. As a matter of fact, I don't think I like the new owner. Well, what's this? What's this cleaner here? Put that under the sink, she told him. It went under the sink. I asked that guy about Joe and Angelina and why they sold the store and why they moved, where they moved. And he wouldn't tell me anything, just said he didn't know. That's the owner of the store? What's his name? I don't know. He wouldn't tell me that either. Well, does he talk? Does he know English? Enough to ring up your groceries and take your money, and that's about it. Now let's get all this stuff off the table. Marshall started gathering up his papers before the invasion of cans and produce. Kate continued. I guess I'll get used to it, but for a while I thought I'd gone into the wrong store. I didn't recognize anybody. They might even have all new people working there. Sandy spoke for the first time. Something weird's going on in this town. And Marshall asked, oh yeah? Sandy didn't elaborate, so Marshall tried to draw it out of her. Well, what do you think it is? Oh, nothing really. It's just a feeling I get. People around here are starting to act weird. Like we're being invaded by aliens. So Marshall just let it go, and the groceries were all put away. Sandy went back to her studies, and Kate got ready to work in the garden. Marshall had a phone call to make. Talk about weird aliens invading the town jarred his memory and his reporter's nose as well. Maybe Langstrad wasn't an alien, but she was certainly weird. He sat on the couch in the living room and took the slip of paper with Ted Harmel's phone number from his wallet. A sunny Saturday morning would be a strange time to find someone home and indoors, but he thought he'd try. The phone rang on the other end several times, and then a man's voice answered. Hello? Hello, Ted Harmel? Yes, who's this? This is Marshall Hogan, the new Clarion editor. Oh, Harmel waited for Marshall to go on. Well, anyway, you know Bernice Kruger, right? I have her working for me. Oh, she's still there, eh? Has she found out anything about her sister? Well, I don't know anything about that. She's never told me. Oh, so how's the paper doing? They made chit-chat about the Clarion, the office, the circulation, whatever may have happened to the cord to the coffee maker. Harmel seemed particularly concerned to hear that Edie had left. Her marriage broke up, Marshall told him. Hey, it was a complete surprise to me. I came in too late to know what was going on. Harmel was doing some thinking on the other end. Didn't say anything. Keep it flowing, Hogan. Yeah, well, I've got a daughter who's a freshman at the college. Is that right? Yeah, doing her prerequisites, jumping through the hoop. She likes it. Well, more power to her. Harmel will certainly be patient. You know, Sandy has a psychology professor I thought was an interesting gal. Langstrat? Yeah, a lot of unusual ideas, Harmel said, I bet. Well, do you know anything about her? Harmel paused and sighed and said, well, what is it that you want to know? Well, where's she coming from anyway? Sandy's bringing home some weird ideas. Harmel had trouble coming up with an answer. It's Eastern mysticism, ancient religious craft. She's just into meditation, higher consciousness, the oneness of the universe. I don't know if any of that makes sense to you. Marshall sighed, not much, but she seems to spread it around a lot, doesn't she? Well, what do you mean? You know, she meets with people on a regular basis. Alf Brummel and Pinkston. Dolores Pinkston? Right, on the Board of Regents. White Brandon, Eugene Baylor. Harmel cut in abruptly. What is it you want to know? Well, I understand you were pretty close to the situation. No, that's wrong. Didn't you have sessions with her yourself? There was a long pause as he said, Who told you that? Well, we just found out. Harmel sighed through his nose after a long pause and said, Listen, what else do you know? Not much. It just smells like there might be a story in it. You know what that's like. Harmel was struggling, groping for words. Yes, I know what it's like, but you're wrong this time. You're really wrong. And another pause and another struggle. Oh, brother, I wish you hadn't called me. Hey, listen, we're both newspapermen. No, you're the newspaperman. I'm out. I'm sure you know all about me. I know your name and your number and you used to own the Clarion. Well, let's leave it at that. I still have respect for the vocation. I don't want to see you ruined. Marshall tried not to lose a big fish. Well, don't leave me in the dark, he said. I'm not trying to leave you in the dark. There are some things I just can't talk about. Sure, I understand. No problem. No, you don't understand. Listen to me. I don't know what you found out, but whatever it is, bury it. Do something else. Cover the Kiwanis tree planting, anything innocuous, but just keep your nose clean. What are you talking about? And quit pumping me for information. What I'm giving you is all you're going to get, and you better make good use of it. I'm telling you, forget Langstrap, forget anything you may have heard about her. Now, I know you're a reporter, and so I know you're going to go out and do just the opposite of what I'm telling you, but let me give you fair warning. Don't. Hogan didn't answer. He said, Hogan, do you hear me? How can I possibly leave it alone now, he said. You have a wife, a daughter. Think of them. Think of yourself. Otherwise, you'll be out on your ear like everybody else. What do you mean everybody else? I don't know anything. I don't know Langstrad. I don't know you. I don't live there anymore. Period. Ted, are you in trouble? Just leave it alone. And with that, he hung up. Marshall slammed the receiver down and let his mind race as he sat there. Leave it alone, Harmel said. Leave it alone. In a pig's eye. Got the newspaper man stirred up.
Yeah. Anybody have any thoughts on that little segment there? Like Mom said, the group that didn't get their way at the church, you think they're just going to say, oh, well, okay, we're just going to come along and support the people that didn't get their way. We're going to support the pastor now. Is that typically what happens?
Wasn't what happened in our experience.
No, it's not typically what happens. I mean, people double down, and it's the same thing in the political arena. We're actually seeing it play out right now, even with Trump and the Clinton guys, the folks. As soon as Trump won, they were incensed that they had lost. And so they began to double down and concoct all kinds of ideas and rationale and agenda to try to, get him out of there. And people are still talking about and trying to impeach him and so forth, etc. And there seems to be no justification for it. But I mean, this is typical, and unfortunately, that plays out in churches as well. And that's what we're going to see in the story here. We're going to see how they try to double down and force the pastor out some other way. And that's typically what happens, unfortunately.
Which is ironic because the most average people aren't looking to cause any conflict or stir up any problems. They're willing to go along with everything.
But in terms of
these people come in and want to take over.
In terms of spiritual warfare, yeah, of course, because they want to promote their own agenda. And that's usually what ends up happening within a church congregation. You get factions that develop and they want to promote their own agenda. One typically might be more conservative, the other might be more liberal. And each side is threatened by the other one. Okay? So they have to try to maintain some kind of control over the situation. So it's really interesting, and it's really just political. It becomes very political. And it has no place in God's Word. It shouldn't have any place in God's church. The church should be above all of that. And I would encourage anybody that's going through that just to either step away for your own sake, or and be praying, for the body to function the way it should. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and continue with our studies in the book of Exodus. We're going through the commandments, and Sin had worked up a set of studies on that. So we're going to let him slide over in the captain's chair here and get back to our studies in Exodus. Thank you. Sim?
Yep. Well, we're on the Seventh Commandment. I'll let someone read or Exodus. What is it? Forget where it is.
Exodus 20.
I think it's 14. So I guess let's go from there. We all kind of think that means. I mean, the really traditional view, at least for just about anybody universally, is obviously like cheating on your spouse or committing adultery. That's probably the most widely accepted for adultery.
Right, sex with somebody outside the confines of marriage.
Yeah.
That's not a popular viewpoint in today's culture.
But for adultery?
That to think that sex outside of marriage is wrong.
Well, I mean, I don't think anybody agrees that it's right. I just think they don't want to believe it's wrong because they want to be with somebody else as well. But I don't think you'll ever hear somebody who cheats on their wife and goes, "That was right." I don't think you'll ever hear anybody who legitimately is married and at least actually likes their spouse.
I think you will find, though, that people will probably have justification.
They'll try to justify it, but they will never actually like it. There'll never be somebody who's like, they're proud of cheating on their wife usually. And I guess there's some cases, but...
It's fixed. It's because the two audio inputs were on at the same time, so it was getting audio from your laptop and the camera at the same time.
I didn't know they were on. I just turned it on the way it was last week. Maybe they'll hold the settings this week and we'll just be able to flip it on next time.
It should. Sometimes what happens when you're scanning through the audio, or when you're scanning through the settings, if you're using the roller, sometimes you'll accidentally change a setting.
Yeah, if you're using the scroll wheel, they'll turn it on and off.
I didn't change any
I'm
settings.
just saying that happens sometimes.
It's because it's happening with the resolution. You'd scroll down and you'd turn off the resolution.
It's harder because that's a touch screen laptop.
Yeah.
So when you scroll and you have a touch screen, you can do all kinds of crazy things that you wouldn't expect.
Crazy.
Okay, well then.
Does that Seventh Commandment include other elements of? I mean, it was talking about adultery, but does it include pornography?
That's what we're going to do next. We'll go for right now. We'll go to Matthew 5:28.
Let's go back. I can monitor the comments so we can have those coming through.
Just reading 5:28.
Okay, they said it's awesome. Sound.
Dad, you there?
Yeah, this is Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes and so forth, as it starts out in chapter 5. When you get down to chapter 27, subtitled Adultery in the Heart, it says, "You have heard that it was said to those of old," meaning talking about the commandment, "You shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart." You want just that verse?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you don't need to do too much more because then it goes on it goes on to expand a little bit more, but not too much more in the direction I was.
Well, and the next is if your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out, cast it from you.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, it doesn't. But after that, it doesn't really go.
So
too
he's
much
taking
that verse was made a big deal of during the presidency of Jimmy Carter. The media had a field day with this.
Really? How come?
Because it was one of those things where I don't know if he brought it out or it came out in an interview with him that he was talking about, looking at a woman with lust in your heart. And the whole media had a field day with that verse.
Right. And why would Jesus, obviously he's expounding on the actual action, right, of adultery. He's expanding on that. And he's making it more of a principle here.
Well, if you look at this verse, it says, whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her. That signals intent. In other words, if you look at someone and you think they're attractive, and you find them attractive, that is not lust. That is simply attractiveness. But this implies that you are intending to look at a woman to lust
To
after.
fantasize. Or
Undressing
Yeah.
her with your eyes.
Right.
Some of them make that way too easy.
Some of them are already just not dressed.
Yeah, I was about to say, they're
That's
already just
becoming
not
a
wearing.
big issue again. I mean, we went through a period where clothing became a little more modest in fashion, and now we're back to the place where the more revealing, and as the weather gets warmer, it gets even worse.
And yeah, so
Right, so maybe our woman would say, well, just don't look. Right? I mean,
Like the
I'm
women
going
that-
to dress the way I want to dress.
Women's March people.
And why do most
Yeah.
women dress provocatively?
To be
To
seen.
get attention.
Yeah,
To
attention,
get
sure.
attention, right? They're provoking attention.
They say that it's for themselves, but how can it be?
Well, I mean, you can rationalize that, and you can say, well, of course I dress this way for me. It's because I like the attention. You know, but it has nothing to do with, like, I don't dress this way for you. I dress this way because I want the attention. You
Right,
know, like,
right.
like it's
Okay, so
It's just
but
pretty
most
silly.
women maybe could say, hey, you don't like it, don't look. Right?
I can remember being in my teens when the miniskirts came out, and I wore really short skirts, and I can remember walking to school, and sometimes people would drive by and honk their horn or whatever, and I would think, you dirty old men.
But yet you're walking
There
down
I
the road.
was showing, as I used to say, more meat than a butcher shop window.
walking down the road scantily dressed.
Yeah.
as a
scantily
teenager.
clad.
Yeah, but I mean, where does this scripture here leave most normal men?
what do you mean by that question?
I mean, is there a man alive other than Christ? That did not succumb to this temptation.
Probably not.
There's probably not
Probably-
a man.
probably
There's probably
not.
not a man alive that has not, except for the Lord, of course, that did not. And so what's the purpose of him bringing this out? Is he just trying to say, oh, you're all a bunch of sinners?
Well, the Reedy's comment was the intent has its seat in the mind or heart. You know, that it has to do with the intention of the heart. You know, that part of the problem is that the Jews wanted to look at the 10 Commandments as 10 rules
10 rules.
instead
and
of 10
if
principles.
I just stay within the parameter of the rule, I'm
Right.
okay. I can
And-
skirt the issue, right, and still be
And that's why they developed all those other laws to define the principle.
to define the principle, right?
But the principle was very simple. This principle was avoid lust.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and when you look at that, so lust means to desire something that's forbidden.
Right, and that's
Lucifer lusted for
why power.
the position of God.
Yeah, he did.
He wanted to be God. That was also a lust. The
Mhm.
lust of the
Correct.
flesh, the pride of the eyes.
Right, so it goes beyond just pleasure,
Yeah, that's
sexual
wrong.
pleasure.
Yeah, well, so also even with this verse, this extends past sleeping with people though, which is what this is kind of the point I was trying to get, was that this verse is talking about how adultery extends past what people all commonly, pretty much everybody generally accepts, which is like cheating on your wife is like adultery.
So, like the last commandment, it goes into the mind, into the thinking process,
Right.
more than just the action itself. And
Yeah, and
probably,
it definitely
actually,
extends
all the
to-
commandments really end up going there.
Back when I was in academy, we had a week of prayer twice a year. We had guest speakers come in, and we had one speaker that came in, and he said, you know, we've looked at this and we've said, okay, we understand adultery is wrong, and he said, but I need to nail this down for young people. He said, this is not about adultery. This is about forbidden sin. And he said, that for men that includes pornography.
Yeah.
And he said, you guys are susceptible to that. And he said, for women, he said, that's romance novels and soap operas. Because in your mind, you are
That's where it
vicariously living
That's
out
where it plays out.
the illicit actions that you see on the screen or read in the magazine or the novel.
Right.
And he said, it's all in the mind. And if you allow your mind to dwell in that channel, that your body will follow.
Eventually.
Your actions will live it out.
Yeah, that's what James says. That's the first chapter of James talks about that.
Mm-hmm.
In
We
other
have a
words,
new
there has to be a
viewer in
seed
India.
planted. there has to be a seed planted. Is that where you were going with it?
I don't know what you're talking
If
about.
there has to be a seed planted, and then you dwell upon it, which in your head it starts to develop, and then eventually it plays out in
Into your
reality,
actions.
into actions.
And that's where learning to check your desires, check your thoughts. And that's probably the hardest part. You know, it's real easy to let your mind wander.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, at least on like the young person like topic thing, they're trying to see. I don't remember what the whole goal entirely was, but they're trying to find a group of, or they're trying to check the love life of people who had watched porn and people who had not. And the two groups that they tried to use for both of those, they couldn't find a control group because everybody had watched porn. So there wasn't anybody they could actually find to make a control group that people who hadn't.
That's sad. But at the
Oh yeah,
same
with the internet now.
but at the same time, it comes into your.
Everybody's got it on their phone.
You just start talking to 80-year-old people who are like,
It's like crazy.
Well, porn used to. I mean, before I put filters on our server, I mean, I was amazed at the flood of this stuff, and all you had to do was be looking at your inbox, and this stuff would come in, and there would be a picture right in front of you.
Yeah.
And I thought, how many men get pulled into this just by virtue of some stranger sending this garbage into their inbox? You know.
yeah.
There was a lot of that. And from what I've heard, I have a friend who's a counselor in Texas, family counselor. And he said the number one issue that he's encountered in his counseling work, in marriage counseling, has been pornography. And he said it's the number one breakup issue for ministry.
Yeah.
He said it is so pervasive now he said it has to be one of the top issues for ministry. He said the world is just so saturated with it.
Yeah, I mean, there's whole industries that flow around the idea of, you know, the crazy stuff that's out there. I mean, with the sex slave industry. I mean, you've got kidnapping involved, you got murder involved, you got
Child trafficking. You got
trafficking involved. I mean, this is all just rampant in our society, and it goes to every level.
you know, there was
It
a
goes
time
into-
when there
it
was a
goes
time
into
when
the
that stuff had to be
Vatican,
hidden.
It goes into the government. It goes everywhere.
Yeah, I think it's probably a particular issue because you know, coming back to that idea of rationalization, is it's like you could come to the place where you're like, well, I'm not physically cheating, you know, or I'm not physically.
Yeah, that was the other
participating
point, was
in
that people
way.
would be like, well, I'm not with anybody. Who am I cheating on if I'm
Like a victimless
I'm with
crime.
myself.
with myself?
Yeah.
And Elsa asked the question earlier. She said, you know, is it possible to commit adultery before you're married?
That's exactly what
Well,
Matthew was saying.
wouldn't that fall under the
Looking at a woman and
area-
lusting after
area
her.
of fornication
Yeah.
instead of adultery?
But aren't they the same thing?
Well, they're similar. I mean, what really defines them both is sex or intercourse.
But it also defines inside or outside of marriage. Fornication is before marriage.
Right.
Well, I was just thinking even more so on a slightly deeper level as well, is that I think to a large degree it is also adultery, not only in a spiritual sense from what God wants for you, but also in a more
Oh no.
Oh, stop it.
but in a more spiritual sense,
Man, stop.
in a more spiritual sense on account of the fact that God has someone for you, and you might be taking prerogative.
Hey.
Hush.
The barker alarm. The barker.
You know, that you might be going ahead and doing something with somebody who wasn't intended to be your wife or your spouse, or you know,
I mean, they're in our society here, in our culture here, this is one of the pet peeves that people around the world kind of hold up against us. I mean, there are whole religions that try to shield from, you know, fornication and adultery. But it's pretty lackadaisical in our society in the West. I.e. the divorce rate, and i.e. people just living together. I mean, you have that kind of going on. When you look at the statistics and the figures, since the 60s, the early 60s, those levels and those charts have really gone incredibly high And so you see a paradigm shift with society in general, thinking it's no big deal.
Yeah. Well, we just watched, or we listened to a podcast of a sermon by David Ashford.
Stop, no. Isabel, no.
Color? I'll put the color on.
I'm just doing my job.
She is.
Just doing my job.
It doesn't have any batteries in it, but she doesn't know that.
Yeah.
Ah.
Oh, Isabel.
Don't you bark.
Yeah.
She's saying she's sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we were listening to a podcast
doing
from
your
David
job.
Ashford, I believe it was, about marriage. And he was talking about those statistics, and he said what they don't tell you about those statistics is that they're talking about, like 50% or whatever of all marriages, it's not accounting for like Christian marriages specifically or, any other specific marriage.
It's even over 50% now.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but he was saying that the statistic they give doesn't account for the specific demographic of Christianity.
Even within Christianity.
I don't know if it's like with the same. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me.
Right.
But I mean, at the same time, of all the married Christian people I know, I can't say that statistically 50% of them have been divorced.
Yeah. It's because really the issue, when you look from a scriptural standpoint, there are more references concerning adultery, with God using it to illustrate what happens when his people step away from the truth. In other words, Israel committed adultery by aligning themselves, having an illicit relationship with another group of people, embracing another culture, getting involved in the habits and traditions that are outside of scriptural guidelines. And so this stepping away from the truth, this idolatrous move that, I mean, when you look at the history of Israel, it was like a yo-yo. They were back and forth and back and forth. God is trying to always keep them on the straight and narrow, but they're always straying away. That straying away is pictured in the Bible as adultery.
Like the story of Hosea.
Yeah.
The prophet was told to take a wife from among the harlots, and time again she left and went back to her old life.
Right.
And the Lord told him to go back and get her.
Yes.
Because that's what he had done.
I thought that was Samuel. No, Samuel had a...
It was an illustration.
He had a
Samuel didn't have anybody.
There was a spiritual.
He had a woman. These women were there.
He was a
There
priest.
There was a spiritual lesson there.
Samson,
you're thinking of.
Samson.
Yeah, there was a spiritual lesson going on there. And so that seems to be more the focus in the Bible concerning adultery, that it's not just about an inappropriate sex act or something. And the other issue is...
It's about the point of betrayal, I think, in a way.
Well, adultery really from a scriptural definition would be a violation of trust.
The violation of covenant.
Yeah, covenant trust, right. So, in that, the focus is more on the spiritual than the individual act from a scriptural standpoint.
Well, you see time and again the Lord talking about how he honors his covenants. His whole being is about keeping his word, keeping his promises.
Right.
And what he wants in his people is to be a people that keep their promises to him and to each other.
The other thing, one of the things that people might find interesting is that typically when people think of adultery, they think of, a man or a woman having, some extramarital affair kind of thing. And when you look and of course, God's people from Mount Sinai on, they're walking around with the tables of stone, right, in the Ark of the Covenant. God wrote it with his own finger, thou shalt not commit adultery, right?
With him living in their midst, essentially.
Right. But yet, quite a few, more than we would even imagine of the patriarchs, had multiple women in their lives. Even Abraham, who was the father, he had concubines. Right? So you have Abraham, I couldn't find Isaac specifically, but certainly Jacob had 4 wives. I mean, you go down the list, and then of course it starts to get really absurd because a lot of them had 15 or 20, right? But then you start to get to the absurd with
You
David.
get to David and Solomon.
And Solomon, Solomon over 1,000. He had his favorite 140, and he had his one dove. I don't know all who that was, but anyway. Again, you see them with all of these, quote, relationships. Let me ask you the question. What made it wrong for David to end up with Bathsheba?
Besides the fact that he was already
Because
married?
there was a right way. I mean, David already had multiple wives.
Well, Bathsheba was already married, wasn't she?
Yeah.
That's the thing the scripture brings out. He was after a married woman, or you could reverse it and say after a married man, that kind of thing. So that was the issue, and of course you don't see a lot of focus on women doing any of that kind of thing in the Bible. It's usually the men.
Because in that time, women were not quite.
That he was going after. Now, if she
if
had been single, if Bathsheba was a single woman, there would have been no issue. He already had like 10 or 12 wives already, right? And I don't know if anybody remembers the what's that animated cartoon with the vegetables?
VeggieTales.
How they are telling the story, how he's going after. He's already got all these ducks, these golden ducks, in this palace, and he's going after this other duck, right?
That belongs to someone else.
That belongs to somebody else.
Yeah.
And he wants that duck, But it's just crazy. The issue really is whether or not the woman is married or not. That's the key. Because again, if the woman is married, then that's a violation of trust. That's breaking up a trust relationship, and that's what.
That's an even greater sin.
That's what causes it to be really an issue. But when you look at all the patriarchs through the Jewish dispensation, almost all of them had multiple women. I started putting together a list, and I was kind of surprised at the number of people that had all these different relationships. Now you mentioned you were thinking of Samson, but I thought you said Samuel.
Yeah.
Actually, Samuel's mom, his mother, Hannah, was it Hannah?
She was one of multiple wives.
She was one of multiple wives but then they were just Jehoiakim, Asher, Shaharaim, Rehoboam, Jehoiada. I mean, all these kings and people. Now, of course, with Solomon, some of the women that he was married to, he probably never even met because it was political. He just aligned himself with different countries and whatnot, and he married the daughter of whoever, and maybe never even saw him. But just it's kind of crazy. So really, the whole idea of adultery goes outside the realm of just a sexual relationship with another person. It goes much deeper than that.
It goes deeper because you're not desiring what God wants for you. You haven't consulted Him.
Right.
You're only going on your human, fleshly desires, your carnal nature.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that is Solomon sleeping with all of his concubines?
Probably.
So I guess you would say the difference between polyamory and adultery is in polyamory, they're all aware of each other. Adultery, you're being secret, you're not being open. So. Yeah.
But I don't know if you were going to Proverbs 6 or Leviticus 20 or Jeremiah 29. But
those we going to Proverbs 6. We're going to go to Romans 1:26 as well.
And something that was kind of interesting, and I'll just kind of mention it briefly because it's kind of a fascinating parallel now that I think about it with David and Bathsheba, was that he did marry her after Uriah was killed, which is then legally okay.
Right.
Not in the way he went about it.
But it was part and parcel of trying to cover his sin.
Yeah.
Right.
Because he had.
Well, he became an adulterer and a murderer.
He was trying to get Uriah and get her pregnant. Yeah.
So he had
just
kind of
got worse from there.
It got worse from there, you see.
Actually,
but the first thing
we'll
was
his desire.
6. It was his desire to want her.
Yeah.
And why would he want her when he's got a dozen back here in the palace?
He's probably got some of the most beautiful women in the entire kingdom.
Right.
And he just catches a look at this woman taking her bath out on the rooftop, and he wants that one.
Yes, from a woman's standpoint, certainly doesn't make any sense at all. But from a man's standpoint, it would probably. If somebody caught your attention, I mean, I don't know. Either he was highly visual, and that was just something that overwhelmed him.
Well, the Bible just talks about men being very visually
Or she was just
fascinated.
naked on the roof and he thought that was attractive. You know, I mean.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
like,
but he's got
like-
got a dozen naked women back in the palace.
like Mom was saying, the real
Yeah,
real
she
like
just took a bath.
yeah.
Well, I'm sure they all were pretty cleanly. Cleanliness was part of their ritual every day.
Well,
He
I
was
don't
just
know.
greedy.
That's it.
Yeah.
He was
Yeah, it was
He had
probably
all
just-
those women, but he wanted that other one that was
Yeah.
married and she was hanging out in the bathtub.
Yeah. And had he been doing what he was supposed to be, he had sent his troops out to go to war, and the king was supposed to go to battle with him, and he stayed behind. Had he been where he was supposed to be, he would not have been tempted with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone says, when was the bath last time you had a bath on your roof? I prefer my door closed.
Yeah, right.
You're rich enough.
Well, I was about to say, what you just said is why she was okay with taking a bath on her roof. You know, because all the men were supposed to be
Gone.
gone.
Of course, now that you mentioned that, there was I don't know if you remember the story of Absalom. Absalom, of course, one of David's sons was, or Solomon's sons.
No, David.
David's sons.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was ticked off about something, and he decided to set up a tent on a rooftop and have sex in the sight of all the congregation that had communed there for whatever purpose. And he's up there in the tent on a rooftop having sex with all these women. I mean, it's
I forgot that story.
Pardon me?
So I forgot that story.
Scott says, Mark
yeah.
7:14-23, what enters into a man via his eyes and ears, etc., doesn't defile, but when it takes root in the heart, it becomes sin. David acted upon what his eyes perceived.
Exactly.
He could have seen it and turned away. The
Now,
honorable thing would have been to turn away.
now here's something else that's interesting that I looked at this week. It's one thing if a person from your own tribe or your own people catches your attention, but it's definitely a no-no if you're looking outside of
Your faith.
your own people, your own faith. They're called, if you look up like strange wives. There's several references to strange wives and how Nehemiah says that that's great evil, marrying a strange, or actually the word means foreign. A foreign. So here there was a kind of a prohibition against actually marrying, taking a wife from a different faith or culture. Now, who do we know in who's an example in the Bible that shows the detriment of that?
My first one that I thought of was Esau. It says Esau was 40 years old when he took unto his wife Judith, the daughter of the Hittite, and Bathsheba, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, which were a grief of mind unto Isaac and
And why
Rebekah.
did he do that? He did that specifically for a reason. Because I looked at that story also this
To
week.
take his parents off or what?
His parents had told Jacob, go find a wife from
Among your people.
among your people. And Esau said, I'm going to do something different. You know.
Take that, Mom.
Now,
and Dad.
probably the most prevalent
Good
example.
illustration
in
of Esau's rebellious spirit
rebellious, absolutely. Now, of course, the one that I think is the greatest example was Solomon. The Bible tells us specifically when he was older, his wives, he had 700 listed. Well, they listed 700 wives and 300 concubines and a couple of more besides that. But it says that his wives took him away
From God.
from God and led him down a path into idolatry. So that prohibition was there for a reason, because a different culture, different ideology, different perspective, and the woman can actually use the sexual relation as a weapon.
To Proverbs.
The proverb. Okay, Sims.
Stop licking.
The Proverbs. What do you want to go to, Sim? 6?
6. We'll go to 6:16. I'll let somebody read like 5 verses. We'll kind of keep on going because we're going all the way to 35 to the end of
16 to
this.
35.
Yeah.
These 6 things doth the Lord hate, yea, 7 are an abomination unto him.
What verse did you start at?
16.
Oh, 16, okay.
A proud look, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that deviseth wicked imaginations, feet that be swift in running to mischief, a false witness that speaketh lies, and he that soweth discord among brethren. My son, keep thy father's commandment, and forsake not the law of thy mother. Bind them continually upon thy heart, and tie them about thy neck. When thou goest, it shall lead thee. When thou sleepest, it shall keep thee. When thou awakest, it shall talk with thee. For the commandment is a lamp, and the law is a light, and reproofs of instruction are the way of life, to keep thee from the evil woman, from the flattery of the tongue of a strange woman. Lust not after her beauty in thine heart, neither let her take thee with her
What David
eyelids.
did.
Neither let her take thee with her eyelids. For by means of a whorish woman a man is brought to a piece of bread, and the adulteress will hunt for the precious life. Interesting statement. Can a man take fire in his bosom, and his clothes not be burned? Can one go upon hot coals, and his feet not be burned? So he that goeth into his neighbour's wife, whosoever toucheth her, shall not be innocent. Men do not despise a thief, if he steal to satisfy his soul when he is hungry. But if he be found, he shall restore sevenfold. He shall give all the substance of his house. But whoso committeth adultery with a woman lacketh understanding. He that doeth it destroyeth his own soul. A wound and dishonor shall he get, and his reproach shall not be wiped away. For jealousy is the rage of a man, therefore he will not spare in the day of vengeance. He will not regard any ransom, neither will he rest content, though thou givest many gifts.
So if was it Uriah? Uriah, that was Bathsheba's husband?
Yeah, Uriah the Hittite.
Yeah, if he had
He was a
found out,
Hittite.
right, and of course David was trying to cover the whole relationship up, but if he had found out, he would have had every right to go right after the king. And of course what this is saying here is that because of that, that's why that's the reason why it's not only a lack of understanding, but that's the reason why you end up suffering
Yeah,
as a result.
these verses do a good bit to explain not only the kind of the reason for some lust and for
It does say
adultery.
destroys, so in other words, you're
Okay.
running a risk. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying that also, on top of explaining kind of why some adultery takes place, it also explains the trouble that comes with it too. All the problems that are brought about from adultery.
Yeah, and I think it brings out a bunch of points.
So if Bathsheba had not been married, there would have been no one to be jealous and come after.
When you think about adultery, you could turn your neighbor's husband into a murderer.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
like you could be the reason that this person becomes a murderer.
Sure.
So it's like you have a lot of things that could happen from adultery.
Yeah, yeah.
Susan says there is such a spiritual cord formed by sexual promiscuity that it takes fervent prayer to be free of it.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking, the very end of this statement where it talks about a wound and dishonor shall be, shall he get, and his reproach shall not be wiped away. It's like when you think of people who are labeled as cheaters,
Reputation.
yeah, their reputation's completely shot, and I don't.
Yeah,
most
or
people, most of those
especially
people never recover
rapists.
their reputation. Yeah, well, rapists, anybody who does it though, when they're caught, their reputation's in the drain, and
Yeah,
like forever,
especially.
that's their label.
Which is interesting because we just, 10, 15 minutes ago we talked about how all men say one, because in the mind, it's happened in the mind.
Yeah.
Have fallen into, it's easy to look at somebody that's actually gone through the action, right, and destroy their reputation, and yet you yourself know that you succumbed in the mind as well.
What would have happened if Bathsheba had said no?
I don't know if that would have even been possible from the palace. If the palace said, "Hey, come up here,"
King says he wants you.
King wants
Well,
to
she
see
may not
you.
have known why he wanted her. I mean, it's,
Right.
She may not have known he was watching.
no, I mean, it may have just been like,
It also
the
would
king
have been a
wants you
surprise
to come
to
to the
her.
palace, and she shows up, and he's like, hey.
Yeah, I don't know in that culture back then, women were considered basically just property, and I don't know if their resistance or their I don't know if that would have went anywhere. Who knows? She may have said, this isn't what we want to do here. But if he persisted, I don't know if back then. Now, certainly today, I think women have more. Don't you think today women have more? There's a better attitude and respect for women today than there was back then.
I think so. I mean, and I don't know that the intent was ever to be disrespectful towards them.
It should be. They should be respected.
Yeah.
I don't think Eve was treated as property.
No.
But it's sad that society evolved to that place where women were considered like property.
Pre-flood was where the idea of multiple wives actually originated. Pre-flood.
Well, because men like variety. Like that's just what we are.
You know what?
Yeah.
Occasionally, it's good to have a different color some day of the week. I don't know.
Well, I mean, so like for guys, it's like we always like building different things. We like variety. We like things that are different. We don't like to stick with one thing usually, and that's generally for everything, not just like women. And that's just the way guys are.
Tell that to Joseph Smith, who started the Mormon Church.
He's a good example of that.
You could shop at any store, or you could
He took other men's wives, their daughters, took some mothers and daughters.
Well, yes, that's what I mean. Like,
Unless
people are just generally programmed. At least guys are generally programmed to be selfish, to want that variety of everything. That's just the way we are.
Yeah, well, I mean, half the world today.
I heard someone try to explain that.
Literally, half the world today believes it's okay for men to have multiple women. Okay? I think they limit it to 4, but the Muslim faith. And they see it as a way to
Increase their tribe.
No, they see it as a way to facilitate that variety.
Yeah.
But also to prevent rape and that kind of thing, because they know the
heart is full of lust.
Right.
Well, I think also to some degree there's almost an element that probably evolved in a practical sense, because if you were living in this time period, and you weren't 100% sure that the one person you were with was going to guarantee that your family was going to produce children and go on.
Right.
That maybe it's just like with Abraham and Sarah, where she's like, maybe the problem's not me, maybe it's him, and
right.
gives it her concubine, and she conceives. Like, maybe it's almost that kind of thinking, like, we need a family to go on, so our chances of that happening are better if...
Yeah, you also had women that were treated as property back then, too.
Sure,
you had many wives.
I'm just thinking of how it would have come about from a practical standpoint of, like, there's only 2 of us and we need to create a family to, like, run the farm.
Well, that's what happened with Leah and Rachel, remember? Leah actually produced 6 sons for Jacob.
Before
Rachel, and so, Rachel's like, okay, Leah gave her concubine, and so Rachel's like, okay, here's my concubine. And so, it just starts that way, and probably that was the rationale originally.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, it doesn't seem like, unless you're in a culture where the woman is not really well respected, it doesn't really work that well to have, multiple wives. Unless you have to have them in separate homes and this kind of thing. But in some cultures, it's just accepted.
And you don't see any real comment from the Lord about
David doing that,
about his people doing multiple wives.
Right. It was definitely something tolerated, even though they were carrying around the law that said don't commit adultery. That wasn't, to have multiple women was not considered adultery.
If they were your wives, it wasn't.
It wasn't. They were your wives.
Well, with David,
as long as you didn't go after, like David, a married woman.
Well, what was interesting to me is Bathsheba was part of the line of the Messiah, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I believe so.
So I mean, in kind of an interesting way, the last woman, I guess she was the last one he ended up with. Or maybe, last one he ended up marrying? I don't know.
I don't think so, but anyway.
Well, then anyways, that she was the one that the Lord had picked to be part of that line.
I think he had 17.
No wonder he died.
1 Samuel 25:43.
Yet he had to hire another one to keep him warm at night?
He had
What's wrong with
multiple
this guy?
wives. Well, one of the guys that's surprising was Gideon. Gideon had 70 sons. from multiple women. 70 biological sons. And of course, he had daughters too, but he had 70 sons. I mean,
That's a seriously busy man.
I mean, that's. But yet, what does God call him? God calls him a mighty man of valor.
Obviously, you know how vigorous that man was.
Yeah, how vigorous. That's a lot of tents.
I don't think he's talking about his ability to produce children.
No, but I'm just saying,
But obviously
from
the
a
man
character standpoint, it was just that's the way things develop back in the day. But I think the more important lesson here is that adultery is that trust issue, is a trust issue, and that's where God, in fact, trust, or we would call it maybe faith, right? And I think that's why God says, prior to his coming, when I come, will I find faith? Will I find trust? You know, has the entire world gone off the rail, involved in all these illicit relationships? Meaning, do you have a patchwork quilt religion? You know, do you have a piece of this and a piece of that sewn into your experience rather than the truth being the predominant thing?
Yeah.
Anyway, Sim, you wanted to wrap us up?
Sure. Well, I only have like one. Actually, well, so we're not done yet. But
We still got
Not
another
done
4
yet.
minutes here, but
Okay,
we
go
also
ahead.
have more to discuss.
I also have 2 more verses that we can go over. I have 1 Corinthians 10:68. Then I also have Romans 1:26.
I'll take the Romans text.
I probably could have gone into Leviticus too,
I'll get
talking about the issue of like gay marriage and stuff as well.
1 Corinthians 10:64,
68.
68. 10:64 plus 4. That's what I said.
So who's reading Romans? Who's reading?
I'm reading Romans.
So man, there is no 1 Corinthians 10:64,
Yeah,
68.
There should be.
it stops in 33.
Perhaps it's in 2 Corinthians.
Oh well, hold on. No, I see what I did. It's 6 and 8.
Oh, 6, 8.
Yeah,
There you
I
Oh.
have this like really small space in
A
between.
little dash.
6 chapter
6 through 8.
1 Corinthians.
10 to 10
Yeah, 6 through 8.
through 8. I'll put a tiny dash between my notes now. No.
Yeah, mine has a tiny little dash because I did 68 on accident.
You want me to read that one first, or
Sure.
is Dad reading Romans first?
Either one works.
All right,
go.
rock,
You
paper,
mentioned
scissors.
you mentioned yours first for a reason, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
No.
That's what I would have thought.
Technically, Romans would be the first one.
Well, let me do it then.
Read away, Father.
126, it says, "For this reason God gave them up to vile passions, for even their women exchanged the natural use for what is against nature. Likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust for one another, men with men committing what is shameful, and receiving in themselves the penalty of their error which is due." So, this kind of steps outside the realm of adultery, right?
Yeah, that's.
No, it isn't, because it's
Isn't
still.
this more
lust.
fornication. Well, lust and fornication.
I mean, the whole issue with this commandment was not about the act itself. Jesus made it clear it was the intent
Yeah.
of the heart.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I mean, Jesus talked about if you even look at a woman and
And
want
so
to.
this is
be
kind
with
of the
her.
ultimate thing here. This is involving the mental and the physical, because they've stepped away from the truth of Scripture. A man and a woman together in a sexual relationship is how it was all supposed to work, and they've stepped away from that truth,
Yeah.
and they were doing something.
Yeah. And adultery extends past marriage because, in terms of what Jesus was saying, was that even if you look at a woman, he didn't specify if she was married or not. He said even if you look at a woman and want to be with her,
Right.
that is adultery. Because you're at least committing lust. Because
Sure.
you're lusting after her in your heart.
Right.
So you already have lost the battle when you start thinking about it and dwelling on something like that.
That's it.
Whether they're
But
married
why-
or
to
not.
make it clear,
That's why.
the fact that the thought crosses your mind does not mean you have sinned.
Right. So when you.
The thought crosses our mind for all kinds of things. There are moments where I think about killing somebody.
When
It
you
doesn't
dwell
mean
on
I
it.
think about it enough to act on it. You
Well,
know?
there's a difference between actually thinking about killing somebody and thinking about killing somebody. Like, I'm gonna kill them. Because we throw that term around pretty loosely. When thinking of actually killing somebody, it's like thinking of, like, I'm gonna get a gun and I'm going to go into their house at night. Like, that's thinking about killing somebody.
That makes it pretty.
Nobody really thinks about that unless they actually have the intent to kill, which is why it becomes the problem. Like, when you think about killing somebody, you're just like, I'm really mad and, like, I'm gonna kill that person. That's probably what you're thinking, right?
But you know you aren't actually going to go.
Yeah,
back on that.
but then somebody who's thinking, like, I'm gonna get a gun and I'm gonna plan this time and that time, you're premeditating an actual killing. That's actually thinking about murder.
And
Like, you're seriously thinking about it. That's when it becomes a problem.
of course, one of the solutions to what we're talking about here would be, what is it in the Psalms, that, where we're to make a covenant with our eyes, kind of thing. Again, guarding the senses, guarding the things that we hear, the things that we see, etc. That's got to play ultimately a very important, critical role in what plays out in our lives.
Much bigger role than anybody wants to acknowledge in today's world.
All right, so Elijah, you're in Corinthians?
Yes, sir.
10, 6 through 8.
6 through 8. I'll read a couple verses before there,
That's
or
fine,
just in
you
the
get some
beginning, that way you
context.
get the context. It says, Moreover, brethren, I would not that ye should be ignorant, how that all of our fathers were under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and were all baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and did all eat the same spiritual meat, and did all drink the same spiritual drink, for they drank of the spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. But with many of them God was not pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. Now these things were our examples, to the intent we should not lust after evil things, as they also lusted. Neither be ye idolaters, as were some of them. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink, and rose up to play. Neither let us commit fornication, as some of them committed, and fell in one day 23,000.
320,000 people.
No, 20.
No, 23,000.
Oh.
3 and
That's
20,000.
Quite a few as well.
I mean, yeah,
That's quite a few.
that's quite
In one day.
Well, I remember thinking when we were talking in Proverbs, he talked about, the reproof and the instruction of your father and mother, bind those around your neck and dwell on those. And I was thinking about Samson. When it came time to get a wife, he looked at this woman from the Philistines. He said, I like her, she looks good, get her for me. And his parents said, isn't there someone from among your own people? They
Right.
knew what the dangers were, and that he had been dedicated to the Lord for a special purpose, and here he was going outside of what they knew the Lord's instruction to be.
Right.
But he was absolutely set on getting his way. And that rebellious spirit is really what the Lord is trying to check, is that it's that I want what I want, whether I should have it or not.
Right. I mean, that you just described our society today.
Well, we've got a society that's becoming very unbridled. They're not reining in their passions in any respect. They can see it in full living color on cable TV on multiple channels, and they can pay for even extra dirty versions if they want it. They can have it pumped right into their homes.
Yeah, not only that, but it's just like always before you.
Yes.
Yeah, even in public.
Yeah, I mean, well, even what they consider to be soft core, so to speak, which is people just wearing panties and stuff. Like you walk through the mall and that's like on all the fashion billboards for like Victoria's Secrets and all these other stores. Just people in their underwear. Like,
Oh,
yeah,
right.
I mean,
Right.
it's
Or just go to a beach.
yeah.
Go to a beach. I mean, that's
All
bathing
people in
suit
their
is nothing
underwear.
more than just basically underwear, right?
We've often said
That's so funny, isn't it?
if you were changing clothes and some strange man walked into the bathroom
You
or the
would
room while you were changing,
respond,
you'd immediately cover
cover
yourself, and yet call it a bikini, and we'll go outside and wear it in public and be proud of it. You've
Right.
got to do a lot of mental gymnastics to get to the place where you think coming out here in this state of undress is acceptable, but this is not.
Yeah, it seems kind of goofy, but anyway. It's like we're supposed to be dressed like this on the beach, but
Yeah.
when we're in the store,
Changing clothes or
we're
whatever.
not.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot to think about for sure.
Yeah, and and of course, here it's citing the examples of Israel when they were in the wilderness. I don't remember which story this is exactly, but I mean, it was serious enough that 23,000 people were.
Yeah, it's interesting. They
slaves
were
as a
eating
result.
and drinking, and then just rising up to play.
So is that
Right.
supposed to be like a euphemism for like they were having an orgy?
It almost sounds like it, yeah, to me.
Well, was that the golden calf incident? Is that what it's referring
no,
to?
there were only 3,000 that died around Mount Sinai.
But I'm saying, wasn't this kind of referencing the golden calf, that eating, drinking, and rising up to play? Wasn't that referring to the golden calf?
Well,
I mean, play can mean a lot of things. It could mean that it also talked about them being idolatry or idolaters. So
In my Bible, it's it's italicized, so it's like it's been added.
Play.
I don't know if that's what does the King James say?
This guy is this he rose up to play.
Is it italicized?
Let me see.
Italicized?
It's Exodus 32:8, and they rose up early on the morrow and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings, and the people sat down to eat and to drink and rose up to play.
Yeah.
Now that's right there from the book of Exodus, which I would assume has to do
Yeah, I
with...
mean they had gods of fornication. They had gods like Baal. I mean, so they had
But
all kinds of
that
things.
is the reference
It
to
could
the
be-
golden calf incident.
It could have been they did all kinds of things.
Well, 23,000 didn't die there.
No, but I think there was another event with the 23.
The other reference that it shows me is Numbers 25:1. It says, "And Israel abode in Shittim, and the people began to commit whoredom with the daughters of Moab, and they called the people unto the sacrifices of their gods, and the people did eat and bowed to their gods." So this must be referencing that instance.
So it's referring to these two big incidents that caused
Sure.
loss of life.
Yeah.
And of course, the
Centered around.
number that died at the golden calf incident was significant. But then this other one, which they should have been able to learn their lesson from that. But here, this other one,
And
Not
I think
too
that
long
was
later.
that was the story where Joshua, wasn't it Joshua took the spear when one of the sons of one of the priests, I believe, just took a foreign woman, walked right past Moses and the rest of them, took her into his tent and was having sex with her in the tent, and
he put a spear through both
he
of
put
them.
a spear through both of them, just kind of pinyated them both together.
Oh, gotcha. So the summary of this, yeah, let's say that's what the summary of this instance is here. Is
Yeah.
that's what it ends with. Is he had the priest Eleazar, I think, or the son.
Yeah.
When Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of
Right.
Aaron, with the priest saw it, he rose up from among the congregation, took a javelin in his hand, and he went
Right into the
after
tent.
the man of Israel into the tent and thrust both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman through her belly.
Yep.
So the plague was stayed from the children of Israel, and those that died of the plague were 20 and 4,000.
Oh wow. Okay, so that was even a different incident there.
Well, that's kind of interesting then, because this says 20 and 3,
Right.
and that instance 20 and 4,000.
Yeah.
But when you think about it, everything in this,
That's a lot of people.
there's apparently
There's
a lot
people dying.
a lot of the idolatry in other religions is involved sex. That almost all of them had some sort of sexual rituals that they engaged in, or priests
Right,
and priestesses.
because of what it does to the mind. I mean, there's this heightened arousal in the
Right.
mind. I mean, passion.
Base
Probably
passion,
the easiest
they call
thing to get caught up in.
Yeah.
But I mean, when you look at most pagan cultures, they're very sexually centered.
Yeah.
In fact, that was when we were in AFCO, our
Is that
classmate Kirk
censored or centered?
centered.
Okay.
Our
Censored.
classmate Kirk
No.
said that when he was a practicing Satanist, that one of the things he said one of the first things you learned was what they called sex magic, which was where you would learn to conjure up a spirit to be intimate with.
Ew.
And they said that was one of the first steps in learning magic that they would teach you in Satanism.
Oh wow.
And he
But
said,
see, it's the
yeah.
very thing that God created to bring two people together in a relationship to mirror the relationship He wanted to have
Yeah.
with His people.
Well, and also, Adam covering his wife is an example of the atonement.
Right. So this is supposed to be the most
And the two
sacred
coming together
relationship,
becoming one. It's all
and the
about
devil has
atonement.
perverted it over and
Max.
over again.
Max, go next door.
Yeah. But yeah, and of course, you showed me pictures a while back, Mom, of a place that might have been in Thailand or something, where basically they had like
Bhutan.
phalluses everywhere.
Bhutan, their national
Bhutan.
symbol is a penis.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got them on their bridges, on their roads, on their billboards. It's like they worship it. They have a garden of huge statues that you can walk through.
Giant
I mean, why anybody would want to do this is beyond my imagination.
But I mean, that's very common for pagan and underdeveloped cultures too. Is like that's what they worship. Sex and sexuality. So.
But to take the one thing that God designed to be the most sacred and profound
the result of his
thing,
life produces life.
And then they've taken this, and that becomes the God.
Pervert it,
And look at the ones at Sodom and Gomorrah. You know, they saw these two strange men come, and these men wanted them, and they didn't care that they were strangers.
Yeah, all reason goes out the window.
Well, they were also men with men too, so they were already pretty far gone.
Right. But I'm saying they were so determined to get their way that even when the angel struck them with blindness, it says they wore themselves out trying to get to the door.
Yeah, that's great.
You know, trying to get in after those men. No matter what happened, they wanted that. That passion was so inflamed that they were out of their minds.
Yeah, it sounds like it must have been a supernatural
inspiration for
thing
them.
on their part. You know, like. I don't think it would be normal for most people to be struck with blindness and still be clamoring for this thing, you know, like it's...
Could have been possessed.
Yeah, there had to be.
I'm sure they were.
Yeah, there had to be possession there.
Well, that's what I'm thinking, anyways.
Yeah,
But that is something that doesn't happen instantaneously. That happens over the course of a practice.
Yeah, we'd all be panicking that we were blind.
Yeah, you would.
But these men were so motivated by whatever this was, you know.
So, Sin, what's the next commandment that you got on your list there?
I have the 8th commandment. It's about stealing.
Stealing?
So that's for next week?
Take that up for next week.
Yep.
Nice job, Sim.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your efforts putting all these together. You know, there aren't many churches that teach about the commandments in any specificity other than just generically refer to 10 commandments.
Who wants to be told what not to do?
Well, I think someone pointed out the perspective that we often think of the commandments as a do not list.
Right.
When really, I forget exactly how he pointed this out, but he kind of said that it's not really like a list of don'ts, it's a list of do's. And that'll kind of change your perspective on, it's not about...
Look at the glass half full.
Look at the coin half full.
So this commandment could be reworded as protect the marriage and the home. Protect those two.
Yeah,
as positive.
Even deeper than that too, you have like the symbolism of the commandments and stuff too, for at least like the spiritual numbers. Like 5 is the number of like law, I think. And then you have 2 5s, which is turning into like the perfect law. There's a bunch of stuff behind like the all the stuff. Same with like the first 4 commandments being about God. And then and then 4 is his number for completion. And then the last 6 are for about man, which 6 is the number for man.
Right.
So even like the number of the 10 commandments is important and symbolic.
It's interesting that it's a 1 and a 0.
1 and a 0.
Yeah, that's how all the world communicates today. 1 and 0.
Binary.
1 and 0s.
Yeah, and I mean it's interesting too, just like in terms of when you look at the order of the commandments and how they're going. We understand that like from 5 over at least is our relationships to each other. And the first one deals with the very foundation of your family, which is your home, your parents. And then the next one is dealing with how you relate to other people. Don't kill anybody. And then this one is relating to personal relationships and marriage and intimacy.
Yeah, 5 means grace.
Right.
Yeah. 4 means creation and world, which is this stuff, and then 6 means man and wickedness.
Well, it's interesting too, because if 7 is completeness, and that's the one about marriage.
There you go.
That's the whole idea.
Yeah.
7 is supposed to be spiritual completeness, apparently.
Yeah. Which would be another
Complementary
example
to
of the
physical
atonement.
completeness.
You're becoming one.
I
Well, yeah, I guess you're up, buddy, before we have our dinner. Just remember Ken's family.
Yeah. Definitely pray now.
Yep.
Okay. Isabel, close your eyes, sweetheart.
No eyes closing your eyes. Cross your paws.
Father, we thank you so much for the Sabbath, and we thank you for the message that my brother Simeon was able to prepare for us to help lead us in this discussion. We ask that you would be with us and protect us from and against this sort of thing, from this disobedience to this commandment. That you would help us to guard our senses and to stand firm for you, no matter what, and to learn to be more like your Son. And we thank you for all the wonderful insights you've left for us in the book, and ask that for the time that we have together, that you would bless it and bless the food to empower us as well, to give us energy and to continue to live out your example. We pray for Kenny's family, that you would give them comfort in this time and be with them and support them, with all of his friends and loved ones that will miss him, and you would bring them comfort. And Lord, for the rest of the Sabbath, give us rest and help us to think about you and to focus on you. This is my prayer in the name of your Son. Amen.
Amen.
So next week, same time, same station.
Yeah.
Yep, thanks for joining us, everybody, and hope you have a great week. Hope the Lord blesses in wonderful ways, and we'll catch up with you then.
Good talking.